So we finally have the 01s, BLON BL01s. They're good, but they're garbage. So before we get into the review, I'll just start with a little disclaimer. This unit was bought by Brian. He bought them brand new from some seller on Tokopedia. We're not affiliated to any brand or any store whatsoever, so this review is of my own complete opinion. Now, the BLON BL01s have been long awaited. They are supposed to be a, well, successor to the 03s, it seems like. I'm not sure about that because, well, they're the 01s, and usually flagships are, well, named incrementally higher in terms of numerical in their names and such, so I'm not sure. And they're priced lower also, so I'm not sure where the 01s are supposed to stand. I think they're supposed to be, well, cheaper than the 03s and supposed to be a lower version of the 03s, but people keep hyping these up as the update or the next BL03 upgrade, whatever. But as I see it, these are just completely different IEM. They're just a slight V shape, quite spicy in the top range, quite okay base, with an alright mid range, and a extremely horrible garbage fitting. Yeah, I don't know how they still managed to cock up the fitting, because I think they did quite well with the 05s, but that's yeah. Anyway, we'll start getting into the sound more. We'll start off with bass. So the bass in the 01s I think are quite good actually. The rumble in the sub bass is quite nice. It still packs quite a slam. The mid bass in the 01s I think are quite what's it called? They're still also quite emphasized. I think they are a bit more emphasized compared to the sub bass actually in the 01s. The kick is and the punches in the mid bass I think are quite well also. Now the speed of the driver isn't the fastest in the world, but it's also not slow. It's not sluggish like, let's say, the 03, I would say. It also doesn't have this bluntness in the bass that we had with the 03s. And yeah, it's still not the. I don't think it's quite the snappiest bass in the world, but it does its job quite well. Now, aside from that, with the improved speed in the bass, it also has less bloat into the mid range, which is well appreciated. Now, when we're talking about the mid range of the 01s, the lower mids to the mid-mids region are fine. I think they're quite weighty. I think male vocals sound quite good on the 01s. Detail and separation in the mid range overall, I think, is also quite good. The problems start where, well, we go into the upper mid range because the 01s have quite of a semblance in the upper mids. And this also then extends into the treble region, but we'll get into that later. So the upper mids of the 01s are quite sibilant. I can still somewhat bear the sibilance of the 01s, not for extended period of time, so I'm not able to quite just relax and listen to the 01s. Oh, that's bad. I just this is the I think one of the jarring problems of the 01s is this sibilance in the upper mid regions. If you can manage sibilance, then you'll be fine. But I am not able to manage sibilance quite well. My ears start to hurt after a certain amount of time. So yeah. Now this problem extends further into the treble. So the treble of the 01s are also quite spicy. Um, on the other hand, it does get quite better extension. I think the treble on the 01s extend quite well. Speed of the treble is also quite good. Overall detail, I think, is also quite good. There's not much change compared to something like, well, let's say the 03s. But yeah, that's all I can say about the sound. It's nothing impressive, and the overall tonality just feels like another V-shaped IEM to me. So I can give it credit for being a quite well executed V shape. The mid range doesn't sound extremely recessed. I think it's still in the mix. It doesn't sound hollow. It's just that the sibilance and the treble spiciness just bothers me too much to give it more credit than that. Now, we'll talk about the soundstage and imaging of the BLON 01s. So the soundstage of the BLON BL01s I think are quite good. Hold on. If this were my head, I think the 01s would have a soundstage of just around my head. I think it extends further into the left and the right compared to forward and back. The center image of the 01s, if this were the center of my head, would just be right about here. It's just slightly forward from the center of my head. Now, imaging wise, I think the BLON BL01s are able to just give me an accuracy of about 45-ish degrees in terms of where the sound is coming from. So I think it's quite good. Now we'll just gloss over accessories. This is where it's even worse than the sibilance and the treble. The 01s still come with this horrible extruded blocky 0.78 millimeter, if I'm correct. The specs actually don't mention that, but the 0.78 millimeter cables fit in here just fine. But they have this sort of blocky extrusion, which might not fit with all of your recessed cables. So you might have to buy a BLON proprietary cable or whatever other cable manufacturer that sells this sort of like, let me just, recessed recessed socket thingy. No, recessed pin, which uses a square shape. Normally QDC, Chronology Net, whatever it does don't use a square shape. They use some sort of like oval-ish shape, which is more universal. I don't really see a lot of connectors like these going around, and the problem with this extrude connector, if you want to use just, well, a non-recessed pin socket pin cable, like a normal 2-pin cable, it'll make this just look too long, and there won't be proper support for the cable, so it might tend to break a bit easier. Now, in terms of the build quality of the BL01s, well, they're metal. They are shaped quite oddly. I don't know what they're supposed to be shaped of, because these just don't fit on my ear properly. I'm not able to get a proper seal on these without either having to change the ear tips quite a lot, so I've had to use Chronology Net Starlines inverted, Celatix spin fit, the ear tips that come in the box, none of those fit. I had to use either the inverted star lines, or I had to just hold them in place with my ears. I didn't really have this problem with the 03s. I was able to use at least some other ear tips with the 03s, and I was able to get at least some fit. The 01s, I think, for me, have a harder time fitting, and I don't know if it's just the angle of the connector or whatever, but I was also not able to, well, with the provided cable, I was not able to get a proper position for the over ear thing. So whenever I'm wearing the 01s, whenever I get a proper seal with the ear tips, and I think the shell fits quite snugly on my ear, the over ear cable has just dangled over somewhere to the right. So if for example these were my ears and this is where they should be hooking up into, the shell at point which is comfortable in my ear, the cable would be in this orientation. It would not go over my ear, but instead would be next to my ear. I think that can be attributed to the very short nozzle of the 01s, but I don't think a lot of people have this issue, or actually I'm not sure, because I haven't really seen a lot of reviews of the 01s, because your ears may differ, but this shape I don't think will work with a lot of people's ears, because my ears I think I usually have the least amount of problems in terms of IEM fittings, which, let's say something like the Blessing 2 fit on my ears properly, and I usually don't have any qualms with in terms of IEM fittings, but these 01s I have issues with. Now, the accessories that come in the BLON BL01s are not a lot. You get the pouch, you get some user manual. It's some sort of material. I don't know why you would carry IEMs in these. These just help you from scratching and tangling cables, but they don't protect your IEMs from water or whatever. And you'll still crush them if you sit on them. But I think, well, the blondes are made of metal, so I think they'll be fine actually. And well, there's no more Opoti and Dreams. There's now only Dreams. And I don't know what this WGZ BLON business is, but okay, all right, not a big problem for me. And so now we're in the dreaded part of the review that a lot of people have been waiting for, which is the comparison with the BLON BL03s. So the BLON BL03s, to me, had some place in this budget range. It was quite a well-tuned IEM. It doesn't have this usual V-shape tuning that you can find in the $20-25-ish price range. It was quite well tuned, I would say. The bass had some issues. It's not the perfect IEM, obviously, but it was a tuning that you could just offer to anyone and they would most likely like it. It had quite a safe treble. Mid-range was also quite thick and nice, and the bass was boosted quite a bit, admittedly, and sounded kind of blunted. And it definitely isn't the most technically proficient IEM in the world, but we love it for what it is. Now, the BLON BL01s, we have waited for them to be the next BLON after the disappointment of the BL05s, which sounded just like a generic V-shaped IEM. And unfortunately, that's what we got with the 01s. They just seem to be another V-shaped IEM. They don't seem to be a technically superior BL03s. They are just a different IEM altogether. I would say the BL01s are just another V-shaped, albeit well executed IEM, except for the spiciness in the treble and the sibilance in the upper mids. But compared to what is available in this price range, I think on comparison it's quite well. But compared to the BL03s, the bass is an improvement to me. I think the bass in the 03s were a bit too much sometimes for me, and the faster bass of the 01s are well appreciated. The mid-range is also a bit thinner compared to the BL03s overall, especially in the lower regions. The treble of the 01s are better extended than the 03s. They're also quite a bit more spicy. And there's quite a bit more sibilance in the upper mid regions. To me, it seems more like a different IEM. I've seen a lot of people just recommend the BL01s if you like the 03s. I would say that if you wanted more treble, you wanted a bit less bass, you wanted faster bass, then yes, get the 01s. But I must warn you, there is more sibilance and thinner mids and a spicier treble, which is what a lot of people who like the 03s didn't want from, well, whatever IEM was recommended in this price range, because that's usually what you get. You get, well, emphasized bass, spicy treble, and sibilant upper mids, and a hollow mid range, which, well, on the 01s, the mid range isn't hollow, so that's why I'm saying that this is a quite well executed V shape. So yeah, if you detach this from the expectations of them being a successor to the 03s, I think these overall are quite a good IEM, especially if you can handle sibilance. I think these are quite excellent actually, and for the price that they're being offered at what, $20, it's a no-brainer for me. It's a no-brainer for a quite well-ish tuned V-shape IEM with a bit of sibilance and treble. Go bonkers, just buy these. If you don't mind sibilance and spicy treble, which, if you're coming from the 03s and you like the relaxed-ish treble presentation with not a lot of sibilance or spiciness in the treble, if you expect them to be the BL03's 2.0 with a nicer technicalities but same tonality, you'll be disappointed. So if you detach your expectations for them to be a successor of the 03s, as I mentioned earlier, these are excellent. But yeah, that's. And oh, I forgot, if the fitting does it for you, because they don't for me. I can't fit these on my ears. That's why they're good, but garbage. And I think that does it for this review. I'll leave what Brian thinks right about here. Um, like if you liked it, comment what you think, and yeah, I'll see you guys next time.